morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Big Buzz Breakfast Club of 2024. My name is Kat Donovan, and I work at Big Buzz Idea Group. I am filling in today for our usual host, Melissa Legowski, who is on site at a conference for a client. Thank you for joining us for What Nonprofit Leaders Need to Know to Prevent Cyber Attacks. We have just a couple housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded, and attendees will receive a link to the recording afterward. Please put any questions in the Q&A or chat box. We will take some time at the end to address all of the questions. And closed captioning functions are offered on your screen, so please select your preferences. If you are not familiar with Big Buzz Idea Group, the company was started over 19 years ago by our CEO and Queen Bee, Melissa Legowski, who is a former nonprofit executive director. Following her experiences in that role, she founded Big Buzz Idea Group to be an outsourcing partner for nonprofits and associations who need the support of a team that really gets it. We know that many nonprofit executives lack the time, staff, skills, and funding that they need. Big Buzz Idea Group fills those gaps in management, marketing, and event services so that you can focus on the big picture and position your organization to thrive. This morning, I am thrilled to welcome Tim Richards, president of Richards Networking Solutions. Tim has been with RNSI for 20 years, helping to provide managed IT services for businesses in and around the Chicagoland area. As president of RNSI, he is focused on making sure RNSI delivers service solutions that ensure your network and systems keep running securely so you can focus on running your business. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and open the floor to Tim. Welcome, Tim. Thanks so much for being at the Breakfast Club today.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you for inviting me today. As she mentioned, my name is Tim Richards, president of RNSI, Richards Network Solutions, and that is not the last time we will talk about acronyms. Unfortunately, with IT, acronyms are very prevalent, so be on the ready to understand some acronyms today. But RNSI is, like Kat mentioned, RNSI has been helping businesses maintain healthy and effective computer networks for over 25 years. My father started the company, and we've been a family-run business out of the western suburbs. We have a hands-on approach to helping. Our main clients are small and medium-sized businesses, but non-for-profits would fit in there as well, navigating their IT and cybersecurity issues. So my years of experience have led me to today's topic of presenting what every nonprofit leader needs to know about protecting from cyber attacks. I will skip that beautiful face and we will move on. All right. So the industries that are kind of under attack are finance, healthcare, construction, legal, manufacturing. But let's be clear, all organizations are being targeted. Organized crime actors don't really care what you're doing. I can't drive that point home enough. Just because you're a not-for-profit does not mean that they're not looking to attack you. Their two basic criteria are, do they think you have money? And do they think they can separate you from your money? That's it. They don't care. You could be a greedy corporation destroying the environment, or you could be a not-for-profit in Chicago. And kind of an aside from that point, I wanted to point out that these organizations are very organized. They're criminal enterprises. They smell, act, taste exactly like real businesses. They have engineers, project managers, financial revenue goals. They have meetings to talk about how to get more money. These are small businesses. The only difference between us and them is their unethical, immoral behaviors. But let's take into mind, though, that sometimes where they are isn't necessarily illegal to attack us in the US. Obviously in the US, if I start attacking somebody that and somebody could prove that it was me, I could be prosecuted for that. In certain countries, they don't care if their citizens are robbing a not-for-profit in Chicago. It's not against the law. All right, so let's take a step back and define cybersecurity and why it's a priority. So bear with me here, I'm going to read the definition. Cybersecurity is the body of technologies, processes, and practices designed to protect computers, handheld and other internet-connected devices, networks, programs, and data from attack, damage, or unauthorized access. And you don't need to know the definition, right? You're not taking a college course. Ultimately, what you need to know is cybersecurity is about managing risk. And for most not-for-profits, IT and cybersecurity is a cost center. It's not helping you get new donors. It's overhead. It's something you have to do or choose not to do. But cybersecurity is about managing that risk. And I'm actually not sure how this affects not-for-profits, but risk management is an ongoing process, and remote work is probably actually pretty strong in not-for-profits, and cloud, the movement to cloud to collaborate has probably grown as well. So risk management needs to be an ongoing process, take into account all these new things that are coming on to your business and how to minimize those risks. So taking the time to understand your not-for-profit, listing out the risks, what kind of assets do you have, the probability that somebody might take those away from you, what's the underlying cost of that, and then measure that up with some preventative initiatives. And why is this important today? Well, as far as I can tell, nobody knows how to predict the future. And like I said, cybersecurity is risk management. So if you knew when the risk was going to occur, you would buy it the minute before, not waste all of your money beforehand, all the prevention. But we can't do that. So today is the best day to take at least small steps to ensuring that the larger risks are covered. And I feel cybersecurity should be one of your main priorities. Small and medium-sized businesses have been realizing greater and greater losses from these attacks. You can see on my screen here, 45% of, I'm showing small and medium-sized businesses report that, excuse me here, cybersecurity is a top priority. And 79% in the middle of the page there are worried that in the next 6 months, they're going to be attacked. And 77% are looking to increase their cybersecurity teams. And these stats kind of fit more in with at the personal level. But as I was preparing, I noticed that I had stories for all of these that I had heard within the last 12 months. And I'm just going to share one of them. And with the context of this conversation, you probably already know when I start with this sentence that I received an email that it was a phishing email or a scam email. So bear with me as I tell the story here. I received an email from my dad, who I said started this business. The email address was Kevin Richards. The subject line made sense, but the body of the email, which raised some flags, was, "Can you buy me some gift cards?" And if you take into context my relationship with my dad, he has been known to minimize the amount of risk that's in some of these random stores. So for example, he'll find something on eBay and he'll tell me to buy it off of eBay for him because he doesn't have an account there and he doesn't want to buy it. So while my flags were raised, I did get to that point and I was like, well, there could be a chance that he did send me an email asking me to buy him gift cards. But then I got down to the signature, and my dad has a very specific email signature or way he signs emails every time. And this was very odd. It just said Kevin. So immediately I knew it was phishing. But my takeaway here from this story is being vigilant is probably the biggest thing that you could take today away from this conversation is just question everything. Do not do not take it at its grain there and follow up with a text or a call and make sure that it is correct. And obviously cybersecurity is very fear-based, so I hope I haven't scared you enough here or too much here. Whoops. So let's go to this slide here about dwell time. And this kind of goes into more specifically about ransomware. And ransomware seems to be the biggest topic of conversation in all small and medium-sized businesses. It's a massive problem. It's malicious software that just shows up on your network and starts making adjustments and then launches and encrypts your entire hard drive, and usually pops up with a statement, or somebody reaches out and says, hey, send us some Bitcoin or some digital currency and we'll unlock your system. So dwell time, and my point here is that dwell time is the time from the minute that it shows up in your network and to being eradicated. And what's happening though in the industry, or from what we've seen, is that the time from when it sets foot into your network to when it launches is diminishing. It's speeding up its process, making sure that it remains hidden or activates as quick as possible before somebody like me would find it and eradicate it. Another one, and this goes back to the revenue meetings that I alluded to in my first slide, but I imagine that they were having some meetings here and they said, when are you guys finding that you're most successful? Or maybe it's just on the dark web or a Reddit post or type thing. But we've noticed that launching times have come to be very consistently in off hours, but during the work week. So like a Tuesday at 7 p.m., all of a sudden your hard drive's encrypted and it starts spreading out throughout your network and encrypting all of your other things within the network. And I'd imagine they were having better success. There's less IT folks available, but it's still in the time frame where like a business leader might realize that they were hacked or have ransomware, so that they might get payment faster. So if I was to ask you, and this is morbid, but if I was to ask you how many homicides were in the US, there's a uniform crime reporting. You can get that data. I looked it up. 2021 had about 23,000 homicides. There's not everybody reports ransomware. And so there's not really a good way to measure this. But in surveys, about every 11 seconds, we believe a ransomware attack is occurring. And I've seen some reports that the average ransomware payment is greater than $1 million. Obviously, it depends on what the assets are and whether or not you would pay that. But authorities, FBI, whomever, always tell you not to pay the ransomware. And I would agree with them. It'd be great if everybody stopped paying ransomware. They would stop probably doing it, right? They're not getting any revenue. But the ransomware comes, you get the banner, you're trying to run your business, you're not for profit. It's your life on the line. So what do you do? And something else to note that I probably should have mentioned earlier is that we're finding more often than not, so greater than 50% of the time, the bad actors do release your files if you pay the ransomware. So you're sitting at your desk, you got that big bullet up there that says, hey, you don't have this hard drive anymore. It's your decision. Do you pay it? You not pay it? Do you announce it to all your customers or your donors that you were attacked? Those are tough decisions to make at that moment, and time is money. So I would hope that you're never in that situation. and hopefully it hasn't happened to you yet. I mentioned the dwell time. On average, it's about 23 days, but the time between it shows up on your network and it launches has been going down. And then downtime from the ransomware is averaging about 21 days and just under $2 million in costs. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, my not-for-profit, we couldn't afford that. We wouldn't pay that. Those types of things go through your mind. Tim is just exaggerating to sell some product, and that's fine. I just want to point out that most of the time we tend to undervalue our assets and the time that it will take to recover. So talking to people in the IT world, cybersecurity professionals, you can see that some of these things are like insurance, where they would be a low cost to prevent something that could be a potential high risk problem. I'm going to skip legislation and jump to cyber insurance. I have some slides on legislation next. Cyber insurance here, I think, it's not necessarily in its infancy, but it's still trying to figure out what is going on. So they started with the product maybe 15 years ago, priced it, and then they were hitting some major claims, paying out a lot of money. And that's when cyber insurance rates skyrocketed, right? They lost money, they need to recoup that money. They ask their insureds to pay for it. But since then, they've kind of come back a little bit in those costs. It still doesn't make sense for a lot of businesses to have cyber insurance, but the rates might adjust and things might change, and I can't predict what's going to happen. But in my conversations with brokers, they've been pointing out that a lot of times that they're having these conversations with companies like you guys, and indirectly the insurance companies are requiring some of these cybersecurity minimums to be in place before they would even consider to underwrite and issue policies. I don't know where the insurance industry is going to go, but I know that it is definitely expensive right now. All right, so regulation. I'm no expert in politics. I'll stick to my lane. But my next few slides here are trying to tell you that the government is taking steps. They're trying to get out in front of this, either with legislation, regulations. My next slide here shows that there was an executive order to increase their detection if they find something on their internal systems. And here you can see that President Biden implemented a plan that 16 different industries needed to report a breach within 72 hours and a payment for ransomware in 24 hours. And I've listed a few of those industries out. And I don't really know how this relates to non-for-profits, but the reason I brought it up is I think it's going to make it very difficult for small and medium-sized businesses to do business with these industries. And the reason that I'm saying that, and I don't know if donors come from corporations or governments, so bear with me on this story here. But we are a subcontractor to a contractor to the state. And in our conversations to becoming this subcontractor, there's a questionnaire, a risk assessment that's going on from the contractor to us. They're trying to determine what types of things that we have in place to control their data. They hand you a risk assessment. I don't know if this is relevant, but these questionnaires seem to be coming through a lot from these type of companies to us about managing the risk. If you're trying to outreach to a corporation or you're running an event maybe, and they give you names and email addresses of all their employees, these types of data transfers and the risk involved, they want to assess that risk and make sure that you are in a position to handle that. So we go through all that, right? And obviously we're pretty strong in this aspect, so we pass. We get accepted. The state buys from them who buys from us, right? But the state comes in and says, here's our questionnaire. And they go through a different risk assessment. And they come back to us and say, well, you have a little bit higher risk than we initially thought, and you need to raise your insurance limits. Perfect, right? You don't have the budget for that. So maybe you go through negotiations, or you reach back out to your insurance company to see how much it's going to cost. And your insurance company goes, whoa, I thought you were a little not-for-profit. What are you guys doing over there? Here's an assessment. Here's a risk assessment questionnaire. And you can just see the number of hurdles that this is going to cause, like working with these types of companies. And I think having somebody in your IT department with knowledge, or a cybersecurity partner like us, could separate you from other not-for-profits. So which should you do? You got to understand who owns the data, who is implementing the technology to protect that data, and then you need somebody to show you where the risks are. So in this case, in my data pie, my data responsibility pie, the data owner owns the liability of the data. They're either sharing it with you, or it is your data. You've collected credit card information or bank account information from your donors that are making monthly contributions. These are liabilities. As soon as they show up on your network, that's a risk. So you need the IT team to implement solutions to protect that risk. But you also need somebody from the security aspect to tell you where those risks lie, right? So what are the components of a well-designed cybersecurity plan? All of these are, right? But that's overwhelming. A corporation or a government, the Pentagon, has to have all of these. A not-for-profit doesn't need all of these. It'd be awesome if you had a dark web research team, or SIEM log management, multi-factor authentication, spam email protections, but it's not feasible within your budget, right? So you got to start somewhere. And I would recommend that you take time with your team, with the partner, and assess what kind of information you have and where your risks lie. This is a very simple analogy, and I'm just going to walk through it, right? So you have a house. What have you done to protect your house? If you go away for a week to the Dominican and you leave your house behind, you are not probably losing sleep on your vacation that somebody's going to break in and steal all of your things. You've taken actions to protect your house. All right, so some of the obvious ones: door, windows, uh, locks, alarms, a dog. Hopefully you didn't leave your dog while you're on vacation, but maybe let's go back to somebody's breaking into your house. Your dog helps attack the intruder. You call the police. Maybe the neighborhood watch saw somebody breaking into your house and calls the police. Insurance, the cameras, weapons, a baseball bat. You have some deterrence, maybe a yard sign, motion sensors. Maybe you've taken some self-defense classes and you know how to respond. These are all things that you've directly or indirectly put into place to protect your house, to detect an intruder, and then to respond. You don't even think about it, probably, right? It just happened, but these are the things that you have in place. What I'm saying is that from your not-for-profit seat, from the leadership role, that taking some time to assess what assets you have, the family, the pets, grandma's jewelry, grandpa's watch, your passports, your laptop full of family photos, whatever those are, how much are they worth? What's the risk in losing them? And then what steps can you take to prevent them from being lost? And then the last step here I'm showing is recover. So what could you use to recover? And I'm going to call out an incident response plan, backups, insurance, and emergency equipment. All right, so here's where I get into, like, what do you need to do? Most often than not, you have some of those things in place. So the answer, the one thing that I would point out is detection. What is going on behind the scenes here? So here are the 5 things that I would recommend that you start looking into. I'm going to call out the policy, the incident response policy plan specifically. There's a lot of these plans, business continuity, disaster recovery. Of course, on the spot, I can't think of any other ones, but there's a lot of plan names that you could think of. This one specifically, I think, is important because it details more of what do you do when there's a breach. I imagine that you have some sensitive information from customers on your network. So what happens when you have an incident? So there's a number of parts to this plan. The first part that I think is the most important is definition of roles, responsibility, the hierarchy. An incident happens, somebody told you, you're the leader, what are the next steps? Who's making these decisions? Who's on your team to help you make these decisions if the responsibility lies to you? Uh, I I think it's enormous help to talk about this with those team members beforehand. I, I this, nobody knows this on this call, but our building had a truck drive through it. We didn't, the first time we didn't necessarily have that planned out. What happens when a truck drives through your wall? If somebody could have told Tim, make sure it's structurally supporting, like the rest of the building doesn't fall on people. So I don't know anything about structural engineer, so why would I be responsible for that role? It doesn't make sense. So getting that lined up ahead of time is critical. And then another point to this is that a lot of times in the heat of the moment, you typically have a team that is trying to help, and you might have 2 people working on the same thing. So let's say communication, you have a couple people in communication, or somebody says internally is working on communication, and then somebody else asked Big Buzz to start working on communication for this communication. But you don't want to waste all of that time when you could just have this already discussed and that person doesn't reach out or doesn't do it internally, and the person just reaches out for help. Other parts to the incident response plan is communication, and that is to lawyers or authorities or to customers. And so defining what thresholds are important or have to be met to call the FBI or call the police, what thresholds have to be met to call a lawyer that, hey, we lost a lot of credit card information and these customers are probably going to sue us. What are those things that help you define it when you're in the heat of the moment making those decisions? So getting that written down is, I think, important. Multi-factor is my next topic here. And I can imagine that most of you already know what multi-factor authentication, and this kind of goes into where I was talking about acronyms. MFA is a huge improvement over username and password. I know I'm being facetious here, but most of you are better than this. But I know customers that have used the same username and same password for their account with their bank or with whatever other application or with Google. So if one of those customers gets hacked and that list of username and passwords is out there, one of the go-to actions is to just start trying those username and passwords at the bank and trying to see if they can steal your money. So MFA, I think, is huge. With social engineering now as well, there's so much that MFA helps prevent. But a lot of times when I'm talking to business leaders, they are looking to be efficient, and obviously MFA slows down that process. But you have to keep in mind the amount of disruption in the logins, and additionally logging out over certain time periods is much greater than the amount of loss if somebody had the username and password to that account. All right, endpoint detection response and managed detection response. More acronyms. So let's start with firewalls and antivirus, ones that are not acronyms. Most likely you have this in place. These are the walls to your defense. They're not letting any known bad actors, threat actors, to get inside into your network. They're on your browsers blocking things. They're in your email systems preventing those. But there are still ways through a wall, doors, windows. There's ways to get beyond the wall, right? And that's where we start talking about endpoint detection and response. And that's a system that's in place that's looking at those endpoints and watching the behaviors that are going on there. And endpoints in this instance are computers, laptops, servers. They're the endpoints, the users usually of the device. Now, managed detection and response is usually when you would have a partner like us and they would be actively looking at your entire network and determining what kind of endpoints are on the network, maybe even what type of cloud networks that you're working with. Maybe you're using Office 365 OneDrive or whatever you're trying to do in the cloud, and then other relevant areas as well. Sometimes there's proprietary systems that are in place for some of the small and mid-sized businesses and not-for-profits, but looking at all that network traffic and aggregating them and trying to look at what's going on. And then they have, like, it's not less known, but you can see types of behaviors on your networks that lead to red flags. Like I was saying with the email signature, there's something occurring on your network that doesn't seem normal, and it raises it to a red flag level. And that's when an engineer of some type gets that notification and acts on it, or as technology keeps improving, algorithm makes that decision, or artificial intelligence. So those types of actions are then created and alerted, right? I would say that this is probably one of the things that you have not done yet, and you have the walls in place, but one thing that's behind the wall, when a bad actor gets behind the wall, knowing that it's there as soon as possible before it encrypts your entire system or crawls around your network and finds the things that are valuable. All right, so security incident and event management. I'm going to stay very top level on this one. It's basically your entire network is creating data points and creating logs, and this is I'm going to simplify it too much here, but it's an aggregator of all that information. And this is definitely taking algorithms into play and looking at all of those logs and trying to determine if there's a threat and what types of actions need to take. And if we were sitting on a table talking about your risks, I would not necessarily lead with this one. This one is growing. It's going to be important, but historically it's for those 16 industries that are heavily regulated. It's more of a compliance aspect of what's going on in your network, logging that, compiling that information, but then tracking what actions were taken to prevent bad actors. All right, so backups. As a phrase that makes sense to everybody, right? Like your files are backed up. My phone backs up my photos of my family and kids to a cloud, but I have them locally as well. They're in two places, right? That's what a backup is. When you're running a not-for-profit, a small not-for-profit, backups are probably forgotten about often. The files, you might think, I'm putting them on the cloud. Microsoft has them on a couple different servers. I'm not going to lose it once it's up in OneDrive. And likely that's right. But all the other assets are not getting backed up. So looking, and I'm going to point to the cybersecurity assessment there at the bottom of my slide, looking at everything that you have and calling out the specific things that need to get backed up and how frequent they need to get backed up. So we back up our customers depending on the need, right? So if you're doing a lot of work and something needs to be backed up every hour, we'll do a backup, and maybe we'll retain some of those backups, but we'll get rid of like different amounts of periods in those times. And I'm probably going into the weeds here, but there's more to backup than just the cloud is all I'm saying into this. And manual backups tend to get forgotten. And back to my predictions of when something bad is going to happen, it usually happens after a couple of days of not backing up, and now you spend more and more time recovering, and getting those automated backups in place will help you recover faster and be back out there trying to move forward with your not-for-profit. And I'm closing up here, but my shameless plugs. Uh, I think that even if you don't talk to us, I definitely think you need to be talking to your team, mapping out what your plans are, defining what you currently already have in place, most likely firewalls, antivirus, and if there is anything else that should be managed better. And RNSI would be a great partner for you, and I'm open to any of that. This is where I asked Kat if there was any questions.
Yeah, Tim, thank you so much. I am putting the link to RNSI's website in the chat for anyone who wishes to go visit you guys and check you out. Please put any questions in the chat for Tim about cybersecurity in your nonprofit. Things that stuck out to me, Tim, were the incident response plan and the incident response team. I know a lot of nonprofits operate on small budgets, and what can you do on a smaller scale to protect your nonprofit? I think having that team in place and making a process. So in the case that something starts to happen, something is fishy, you get that team together and you are able to examine that further. The other thing that stuck out to me, I know a lot of nonprofits take membership dues. So there is a transaction occurring there. And they also can take credit card payment for like an annual gala. So there's ticket sales that could be occurring. And I think just making sure that maybe the 2FA, the multi-factor, is set up in that part of your website might be a good place to start. So, and then the phishing emails. I think we all get them. We all get them more than we like to get them. I got one this morning. But just like you said, looking for those red flags. I always like to look at the sender. I find it very alarming that that one came from your dad. I know that I get a lot where the sender is just the first red flag. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah.
It's not someone I'm familiar with. The email address is not a real email address. So looking at who it's from, I think, is a really good first step. And then, like you said, the language in the email and listening to your gut.
I should jump in there. That was, we also, RNSI has a phishing education portion as well. So we implement phishing education to our customers, and we have that in place for our employees. And so that one was a phishing attempt, and it was it was in place to trick me.
Yeah.
So it usually, like you're saying, the email address is a dead giveaway, and who it replies to is the dead giveaway. So keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, and I think 2 words that everyone needs to keep on their radar are gift cards. That is something that is used most of the time. So stop right there and think about what's going on with that email. We do have a question in our chat, Tim. What should we consider when our employees work remotely to protect our organization's data? That's happening a lot since the pandemic. I know a lot of nonprofit employees have remote workers now. What do you recommend?
I know I'm not sure on a budget, but the main point is control over the data and making sure that the data doesn't reside or get transferred to a device that you don't have control over, that you don't have antivirus on, you don't have endpoint detection, you don't have those things on my personal laptop. You might have it on a laptop that you control. That probably is on a budget. The easiest route is to give your employees a laptop that you control to manage that data. Then there are other ways, virtual networks. So that's the way that we implement it, and it's a little bit more cost prohibitive, but setting up a VPN and then controlling the data, making sure that they manage data that's on your internal network and not out in the Dominican Republic if somebody is working on vacation. Hopefully they're not working on vacation, but
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Another question we have is, if you use something like Google Drive, is their backup good enough?
it is for what it's doing. It absolutely is. There is a risk that Google shuts down tomorrow. It's a low risk, but they're going to back up what you need it to back up. I think my point was that there are other things that should be backed up as well, besides what's on Google Drive.
Another question is, in the instance of ticket sales, which is something that nonprofits do quite regularly, when using a third-party platform, is the organization covered through that third party if they have a breach, or is the organization on the hook?
Well, passing blame is going to be probably up to the courts, but most likely it's not. It's the credit card processor, unless it was one of your employees that took the information or was the breach from. So having something in place that could tell that the breach wasn't you and the breach was from the third party authorized credit card processor, you're going to have to argue that in court most likely.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to go back to our Q&A. We have another question. Are there things that we should consider in setting up organization-wide MFA for the organization?
We have MFA on. We recommend MFA on the Windows. So before you even get into your network, that's the main MFA. And I would put that on day one if I walked into any not-for-profit. Username, name and password, social engineering. It's just so easy to get Tim to believe that Kat is asking him, hey, I lost my password. I'm locked out of my account. Can you give me yours so I can do work? It's just so easy to do that. And then all of a sudden everything's gone. So access to the network should be MFA. And then the other thing is it depends on what's there and whether or not MFA should be available. Obviously, banks force it upon you, and some cloud providers would force it upon you. We have it on our proprietary software as well. So that one's a risk assessment. I would put it back to you as the business leader to define, is it worth implementing this cost?
Great. Wonderful. Are there any other questions? I'm looking, I don't see anything. I want to thank Tim Richards so much for sharing all of this important information. It's a great way to kick off the new year by protecting your nonprofit. I am going to put in the chat, we have the February Big Buzz Breakfast Club registration open. It is going to be the head and the heart in strategic collaborations with our friends over at Mission Plus Strategy and Keystone Alliance. So if you would like to join us February 8th at 9 o'clock, we look forward to seeing you for that breakfast club. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.